Welcome to our third and penultimate episode in our four-part Talent Hub series, powered by Mindcore. This week's episode is going to focus on organizations of the future. We have yet again a great lineup of speakers. Our first guest speaker is Frank Schellstrutter, the chairman of Intersearch, one of the top international executive search organizations in the world. And Intersearch is represented in South Africa by Mindcore. And Mindcore is an EO member company and a strategic partner of the EO Johannesburg chapter. We're also super excited to have some in the boardroom experience with Greg Solomon, the CEO of McDonald's South Africa. Today, Jackie from Mindcore is going to facilitate the session as she has with the previous two sessions. Just a bit of some points to keep in mind. Please remember to post your questions onto the chat. And we also aim to finish today's session by 10 a.m. We got some feedback from some people to say that the sessions were a little bit long. We're going to try and finish half an hour earlier today. So the breakout sessions will be a little bit shorter. But can we ask to please try and stay on for those breakout sessions. They really are invaluable, a good networking opportunity. Please also note that the breakout sessions are for EO and Accelerator members only. So if you have any staff that are attending and listening to the speakers, that's absolutely no problem. But we do follow a forum style breakout session, and we would appreciate it if that is reserved for the EO and Accelerator members only. So yes, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jackie before we start with our first guest speaker. Jackie, over to you. Jackie, you're on mute.
Yes, I saw that. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Very nice to see you all again. Super excited to have you here for today. As Josh said, we've got a fantastic lineup for us. Just from a bit of just housekeeping, just to take you through the agenda, we are going to start off with Frank Schellstrutter from Intersearch, as mentioned by Josh, who's going to take us through some global trends and really just have an open discussion with us regarding what's happening in the rest of the world and what he's seeing in terms of trends, specifically around the future of organizations. That's going to take us to about 8:30. Then we're going to go in with Greg, who's going to talk to us how leadership must shape the way we play the game. That's going to take us to about 9:30, and then we'll have a small break. And as Josh said, we're going to then go into the breakout sessions and for a couple of minutes, and then a plenary feedback very quickly. So taking into consideration the feedback that we've had, we are really going to try and finish earlier and give you a few more body breaks. And we look forward to a very interactive session. With that, I'd just like to hand over to Trevor quickly to introduce Frank and Greg. Over to you, Trev.
Thank you, Jackie. I'd like to welcome Frank Schellstrutter, the chairman of Intersearch Worldwide, organization of executive search firms. Frank started his executive search career as founding partner of Schellstrutter Delcourt Associates, which was founded in 1990. He deals with CEO and C-suite level positions across industries. Frank holds a master's degree in psychology and educational sciences at the University of Ghent, with postgraduate in psychoanalysis, as well as a certificate in director and board effectiveness from the Gubiner Institute of Directors. For more than 2 decades, he has been a professor of human resources at the Hogeschool Ghent. Frank is also a former director of the Municipal Museum of Contemporary Art in Ghent. Established in 1989, Intersearch ranks as one of the top international executive search firms in the world, with more than 90 offices in over 50 countries. Through its partner firms and knowledge and expertise, Intersearch provides clients with access to exceptional candidates across the globe. Intersearch's extensive network is firmly established and has depth in local expertise in each market. Mindcore is privileged to represent and be a shareholder in Intersearch in Sub-Saharan Africa. I've been privileged to have worked with Frank over the last 5 years, and until the pandemic, have enjoyed meeting him in different locations across the globe. for Intersearch's annual conference, where we discuss international talent, recruitment, trends, and business opportunities. Frank is going to share his insights into global international talent trends. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Trevor, for this nice introduction, and I'm very delighted that I can speak to you, to all of you. I understand that most of you are entrepreneurs and are somehow related to South Africa and to Mindcore, and that most of you a lot of you have their own firm. And today I want to speak, or Trevor asked me to speak to you about the organization of the future, and how it relates to talent. It's a simple question, but not an easy one to answer. And I think a lot of you have some ideas about it. And let's say I want to go through some topics. I'll try to give you some insights and ideas on it, and I'm relying on literature and also on the experience, as you heard, of an executive search professional, being in this profession for more than 30 years. And of course, when you read aloud your CV, sometimes you're surprised that that you are so far away from the beginning. And that I took a U-turn in the beginning of my career after working for 3 years as a clinical psychologist, helping children and their parents with all kinds of problems, stuttering, emotional problems, bedwetting, and so on. And then making a U-turn into executive search, first in recruitment, and after a while, I started my own firm in 1990. Meanwhile, we are part of a global network and are very well connected to South Africa through Mindcore, and already did some searches together. I'm not here to talk about executive search, but of course, in being a chairman, it's the first time, being in Intersearch for 20 years or a little bit more than 20 years, it's the first time that all offices and countries were struck by the same problem at almost the same time. In former periods, you had a crisis, but that crisis was discontinued. It was some countries were hit, others were less hit, but today it was the same problem at almost the same time. And before COVID, we already discovered other problems like global warming as a common planetary problem. But 2 years ago, I expect no one would have thought that a virus could hit so and strike our societies and economies in such a way. It has, an unseen effect on our day-to-day life. I think also in South Africa. Quarantine and social distancing is one of the most visible and intrusive changes in social behavior. We know the battle is not yet won. The vaccination programs are started and we will be finalized hopefully by the end of the year or during this year. So what do we expect? Do we expect that everything comes back to normal, as we say, by 21, late 21 or 22? We are used, or we were used to talk about the new normal before, when we wanted to describe the overall and general presence of digital tools and social media. And this implied that the old normal had become abnormal. In order to define something as normal, you need an abnormal. And also the COVID-19 crisis will define a new normal. There will be a before and an after, a pre-COVID-19 and a post-COVID-19 area. So the first thing I would like to examine in 3 capital points is the effect on economy and organization of the future. So in the post-COVID-19 area, what will be 3 capital things which are interrelated and which have to do with economy and organization? The first is that The digitization accelerates. We see, and we already noticed that there was, of course, already a digital world. But today we see, due to the COVID-19 crisis, a tremendous growth. We have, if we did it not before, we learned shopping online. We have customer service online everywhere. The supply chain has reinvented and herself. Artificial intelligence is being applied in different sectors. And this crisis calls for innovation. I think a lot of you have to redefine their businesses. And it launched a new series of entrepreneurs. I'm referring to a study, to some figures in the United States, that in the third quarter of last year, more than 1.5 million new business applications were done in the US. That was more than the double of the figure the year before in 90. We see also not only a generation of new entrepreneurs, but in existing companies, in bigger companies, that there were productivity gains that were created. Companies had to reconfigure their operations to make it more efficient and transform them. So greater productivity will follow. Some businesses are in crisis, like the leisure travel, the business travel, shopping, and so on. But other businesses emerged, and on the contrary, some classical businesses are doing very well. Not that they have grown in a spectacular way in turnover, but they have grown in profit. They became more productive, more efficient. So the second change and future change post-COVID is the importance of three sectors: the biopharma, the healthcare, and the green sector. Excuse me. The vaccine for COVID-19 is rolled out in less than a year, which is spectacular. Before that, it sometimes took years, sometimes a decade. And this could foreshadow a massive acceleration, or we could expect, from medical biopharmaceutical innovation. There are, well, I think, for instance, gene editing technologies, they could curb malaria, which kills today 250,000 people a year. They are researching on cellular therapies that could repair or replace damaged cells and tissues. We're on the verge, or we are in the beginning of the creation of new vaccines that maybe could prevent even cancer or some heart diseases. They call it, in short, the bio-revolution. I think the bio-revolution will be one of the spearheads of the new development. Second is healthcare systems. They will be more modernized and updated with the latest technologies. The international community and each and every country should be and will be well prepared for the next pandemic. And of course, sustainability is no longer debated. More and more there is, let's say, a consensus that it is important, and more funds, private capital goes into green technologies. So first, digitization accelerates. The biopharma, healthcare, and green sector is coming in the front and see something completely different, but still an important change, and which is more related to human resources, is homework. The future of work is reshaped also. Nothing new for you, but remote working was already applied in some companies. But then again, the COVID-19 also accelerated this aspect, the remote working. In the McKinsey, in a McKinsey report, in the McKinsey Global Institute estimates that they figured out that more than 20% of the global workforce could work the majority of the time away from the office and be just as effective. There's most of them in high-skilled jobs in sectors such as finance, insurance, IT, but as well as human resource consulting and executive search. The moment that we had to go in quarantine, and this was March last year in Belgium, when the first wave of contaminations was in this country, we immediately worked from home. We were a bit lucky that some months before we had installed all kinds of software and hardware in order for people to work at distance. And from the one day or another, we worked from home, 100%. Only the secretary stayed at the office, which was a very, very good experience. And we stayed even more effective than before. And what do you need? You need a good customer relation, a good database, a good ERP system, and of course, strong KPIs, because working remote has to be followed up. If you don't have the KPIs, it's very difficult to check it, or you spend a lot of time in controlling everything. That means we come into an organization in which there is no direct control. The control is done through a system, through this digitization. And the first time, and today it's possible due to technology. The challenge, of course, is how to create, when everybody or most of your staff is working from home or working from another place, how to create a company culture. Because a company culture is working together, talking to each other during the spare time and so on. How to create a team spirit when you're not there. The World Economic Forum in 2018 estimated that another trend is that more than half of the employees would need a significant reskilling or an upskilling by 2021. And that was before, the study was before the COVID-19 crisis. I think this will be even more true today. Workforce development is a priority. Reskilling current staff costs less than letting them go or finding new people. So, and the last question is, okay, how does this relate to talent? And I could sum up, let's say, all the competences one need to have in a company, but I did not do that. I would focus only in these things and these competences that are really important today. And I think there are 3 categories of importance. And these are, first of all, motivation. I think you have to define in your company if there is enough entrepreneurship and resilience. Entrepreneurship means that people who dare to start something, who dare to take decisions, who dare to jump into the water. And entrepreneurs, most of them are very resilient. When they fail, they start over again. Not only the ability and the courage to start, but also the energy and the power to start over and over again. Some key people in your organization need to excel in these skills. Of course, the founder, maybe it's the founder, maybe it's one of your key staff members, especially in the executive corner. Because resilient people, they make companies resilient in periods of crises. And we see that even in periods of crises, that more than 20% of the companies have more EBIT and EBITDA than before. It means that they responded to that crisis in a very fast and resilient way. The second set of skills is about thought. So it is important to have a competence we call in our profession to leverage innovation. The changes happen so fast, the economy is responding so rapidly, entrepreneurship is surging up everywhere. You need some creativity and innovation in your company. So creative and innovative skills in a fast-changing environment are key in this period. The ability to think out of the box, and not only think out of the box, but to implement and capitalize on these ideas, to develop new ideas and to put them into action. The third set of skills is about people, which becomes a little bit more complex. We are not raised by the computer. We are raised by our mother and our father who loved us and hugged us in most of the cases. Or somebody was there to hug you and to give you some warmth and some physical strength. And this is, of course, feeding cannot happen in a digital environment, and nourishing can't either. So that means that collaboration and teamwork, which goes to the sympathy, let's say sympathy side of your brain, it has to be also, there has to be a physical presence also. So to be able to collaborate and to do some teamwork, to come across, to have a connection through the video and to the screen is a capacity, but to work together and to be more effective in remote working and still creating a common culture is a challenge. So a presence in the office is I think vital in the post-COVID period. And once we're all vaccinated, we will go back to hugging and kissing each other, a little bit more careful now, a little bit more prudent. But learning to keep in touch and reskill in a remote management is important. And also understanding the need and the value to still meet in person and to connect. Another group is another important thing today is, I'm really curious if you experience the same thing, is to redefine the skills you need for the future. Maybe you have to shift from more salespeople to more digital skills, data scientists, engineers. Or maybe you have to do something else, or maybe you have to upgrade your staff. Try to assess what power you have in-house and how you can change that. Make sure that the key skills are recruited, that you only have the best persons in-house, and that you probably need some headhunting there in some cases, but don't forget your own staff, which is the core of your company, and redefine the skills or upgrade the skills in order to proceed and go forward. And last is shift to remote work offers an opportunity. It makes your market, but also your workforce, truly international. And I think in South Africa especially, you're very good in English, you're very central in your region, you're leading you're a leading country in Africa, and you have a very wonderful, diverse country. I think you are in the forefront, and you are gifted to become truly international. As headhunters, we are faced with a more and more international searches today and cross-border searches. So this is a little bit the conclusion that, okay, a lot of these changes need not new skills, but other skills that come in the forefront. And we have to work on that. We have to search for the right staff. We have assessed the competences. And of course, we have to stay meeting in person in real life and not only connecting digitally. So normally I would see on your faces what you think about this little address and this little speech. Now I don't have a clue. So I don't, I would like to hear some of your questions. If there's not time, if there's still time for it, thank you very much for listening. I hope it was enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was truly insightful and really brought a fresh perspective. It's really great to see that we're not the only ones battling with some of the challenges that you've already mentioned. We've got some of the questions coming through. There was one question that came through to you to say from Joss, what are some of the practical examples companies are doing to break the whole Zoom fatigue? As you mentioned, a big thing is the collaboration. So what have you seen across the world is being done to break that Zoom fatigue?
Could you repeat what did you, I didn't hear it. What did you do to, or
the question, Frank, from Joss was, have you got any practical examples that you could share with a team around what organizations and companies are doing across the world to overcome what is referred to as Zoom fatigue, or, you know, interacting via the screen on a continuous basis?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think we have to understand that indeed all these events that happen online, like for instance the conference online, is something completely different. We all work in another company, but when you work in the same company, there are indeed some sessions. I think I'm not so much in, well, a tea party online could be effective, but could also be annoying, because the more persons there are, the more difficult it becomes. What in practice works more in that you should need in, because everybody is still, every manager is still responsible for his people and his staff, that he should keep an eye on these people, for instance, who feel lonely or who are a little bit more isolated. Maybe they are a bachelor or they work alone, they don't have a partner, they don't have friends of, well, they don't have family, and they're not able to meet friends, is that you have people who monitor these signals of loneliness, and sometimes it's more effective that for instance, supporting staff, secretary, or maybe the manager, but the manager is maybe a little bit more too far away from some people. That in my company, for instance, to give you an example, we organize it that the finance manager, who is a lady, and my secretary, they get along very well, and they keep an eye on everybody. And if they feel that somebody is going, let's say, down, then they phone him, and then they take a coffee together, and they chat for half an hour on things as you would do in the office.
Fantastic.
I'm thinking that this is only a temporary problem. In the post-COVID area, we will be happy to come to the office and to chat together. And I think that chatting over the coffee could be, if you work in different countries or very far from each other, if you can't come to the office, it's a good practice. So it will reinforce remotely located offices will come together. That's what we learned. But I still believe in a meeting in person. Is that a question? Is that an answer to your question? Maybe.
That does. Thank you, Frank. Joss, I hope that answers your question, and it really brings back the third element from the categories around nourishing your people and really getting to understand where each individual is at, and assigning the people to look after each other. So thank you very much for that, Frank. A second question from Kim that's come through is, you mentioned that the new skills are evolving post-COVID especially as well. and we need to measure these new skills. Do you have any kind of input in terms of the tools that you are currently using to measure the softer skills? Because it's easy to measure the hard skills, but when we're talking about things like innovation and resilience and creativity and energy, what have you seen across the world as far as measurement is concerned? And thank you for your question, Kim.
That's a very good question, and that's a very hard question also to answer. And I think you have to turn, of course, to your specialist locally. I can tell you what we would do and how we would measure these skills. Of course, Trevor, Jackie, and their company have also a lot of ability in this sector. In general, we use different tools to assess a skill or a competence. And the first, let's say, the first thing you have to do is to do a competence-based interview. If you want to assess, for instance, well, resilience is a very, very hard one to assess because let's say the past is the best foreteller of the future. So you have to examine what happened in the past without telling to the person that you're really examining or searching for his skill, for instance, resilience. So you have to go into detail into a conversation during an interview, could be online, better even in person if it's really an in-depth interview, and looking for experiences in the past in which the person showed behavior that was like that he could cope with failure and that he would start over again. And so you would, first of all, in your interview, because he does not know what you're looking for, he maybe thinks you're looking for an engineer, but you're looking for a resilient engineer who can really well start over again when things fails because the project is very difficult. And you would ask him of describing you situations in the past where he had to do something over again, or just ask, can you give me some example in which some of your efforts failed? Oh yeah, and then you start digging into that example until you see some behavior that looks like resilience. If somebody, it could also be in his curriculum vitae, if somebody is a job hopper, it could be that in the beginning of his career, he's still looking for the right thing, okay? But if it's all the time and for 10 years, 20 years job hopping, I'm not sure this is a strong, this is not the kind of resilience that we would be looking for. So first of all, you go into a competence-based interview, and I think the people of Mindcore are very competent in this area and could guide you through this. Second, you could examine the profile through a series of tests, personality tests, like we use OPQ, we use the California Personality Inventory, in which you have a lot of factors that determine what the personality could be. That could be confirmation, or it could contradict your findings. And maybe you need, for some things you need, well, cognitive or intelligence tests, but it's not always necessary, but sometimes it is. And thirdly, you would do, if in some cases you would examine this by an assessment center, creating a situation in which a play in which the people can display how they react on unforeseen circumstances. So leverage innovation, if you would look into that. The most difficult is to find these in people with no experience. If they have no experience, you only can rely on assessment center and testing, because there is a little experience. so few experiences that even the person himself doesn't know it himself. When you're young, you don't really know what you want, and you don't really know your talent. So if you're in life, you find what you want, what you like to do, and you know your talent, well, most of the time, then you make money or then you become successful.
Thank you very much, Frank. So definitely past behavior predicts future behavior, competency-based interviews, some great tools to use, not only from a recruitment perspective, but also on your internal staff. So it can be applied both internally and externally. We have another question that's come through around what have you seen are the biggest changes that you're finding in types of the new roles and the types of roles now versus 5 years ago, and how do you see this changing over the next 5 years?
What I would, could you repeat the changes in what kind of roles?
So the question is, what are the biggest changes that you're finding in the type of roles now, post-COVID, versus 5 years ago? And how do you see this changing over the next 5 years?
Okay. The type of roles, eh?
Yes.
Okay, that's a difficult one. My first reaction as a person is always, you know, everything changes, but I'm still the same. So the first thing I'm looking for is what does not change. And if of course, if everything was changed all the time, we would be in complete anxiety all the time. So most of the things stay the same, which is very comfortable. Most of the things stay the same. If what not will change in the type of roles is that, well, people are still and organizations are still looking for leadership, meaning that if they recruit an executive, if they recruit a VP, they recruit somebody that they think that can shape the future and lead them to that future. So that will not change really. Are there types of roles versus 5 years ago that will change? Of course, because you have all the wave of digitization, the wave of biotechnology, the wave of sustainability will of course have an impact on the positions and the content of these positions, and this will increase. We will look for more data scientists, we will look for more engineers in the bioengineering and so on. But basically, these are general trends and a shift in economical dominance. But for the rest, I would say, and this will go on, and it will even increase. And but there will, for the rest, I think everything will well, the essence will stay a little bit the same.
Well, I think a lot of us are.
Is that a disappointing answer?
No, I think a lot of us are going, yay. So there's enough change happening. So it's fantastic.
There's, for instance, to complete that, for the last, let's say, since 2000, people are telling me that executive search will disappear. You will not need recruiters anymore. That's okay. At first, I was a little bit worried, and I started in 2000 of having. I wanted to start with a startup with somebody, and in the startup was called mycv.com. So if it was 2000 or something. If you analyze it afterwards, it was a kind of LinkedIn that we tried to create, but then we did not go on with it because we had too much work and so on. And because we were afraid that it would disappear. So every 3 to 5 years, we do the same exercise all over again. Why are we are not important, but why will executive search still be necessary in a digital world? And we see that more and more people have to rely on headhunting, although all the data is available to them. meaning that even with artificial intelligence, you're able to create a mass of data and a mass of candidates into maybe 100, 200, but you will never have that fine selection. Can you imagine that the computer can assess your resilience? Maybe that's possible. Maybe somebody who only studied arithmetic thinks it possible, but you know the mathematical and the symbolic word, our language, is not really 100% fit to the reality. A tree is not a tree. The word tree is not a tree. The word man is not a man. The word woman is not a woman. What a confusion if we think that a woman is a woman. What a confusion if we think that a man is a man. That creates a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And so there will always be a need for somebody who understands that all that we're doing, the digital world, is like a symbolic net that we wave over the reality. It's virtual, but it's not the same as the reality. As my name is not my subject, my name is not me, and still it is a little bit. So you will always need that kind of interpretation, that kind of person who can read through the lines, and by changing something, changing the world. But if you don't understand the relation between the digital, the symbolic world, and the real world, it becomes very difficult. Okay, that's maybe too philosophical.
Well, thank you very much for that, Frank. I'm just conscious of our time, but that was a very interesting insight. So thank you very much for that. Another question that's come up from Hazim is, what measures are taken to keep the business information and data safe and protected when you've got your employees working remotely? I think that's a challenge a lot of businesses are facing in terms of the data that they've got. Any insights with regards to that?
Yeah. Of course, you have, in order to keep the data confidential and safe, I'm not sure there's a big difference between working remotely and working in the office. But you are right, when you work remotely and you have bad intentions, it's more easy to do this, to really have this, not have it, but to implement these bad intentions. So confidentiality and keeping the data safe. Well, of course there is a GDPR, but I will not go into that because maybe in South Africa it's completely different, the GDPR. The data safe is, first of all, there's a technical thing that you have to measure that only that person has access to the computer and not another one. You need to have the necessary hardware and software to protect your data from the outside world. But you can never 100% protect yourself against bad will of somebody who wants to steal something or apply this to something else. But it is good that is why it's so important that you have a kind of, even when you work in a remote way, that you have a kind of bonding, because working for an office, working in a company, working together is based on trust. And the computer can help you to create the borderlines of that trust, that there's no trespassing. But on the other hand, you need to rely on the other. If somebody is distrustful, maybe you discover it. If he's very smart, you will never discover it. But I think in 99.9% of the cases, people are trustworthy and do not cross the line of let's say, data safety and so on. But we have to keep an eye on it. And you have to listen to complaints of candidates, complaints of clients, of course. And if you do really something wrong, there are always traces and somebody can trace you back. So I'm not really worried about the data safety.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
I still believe that most of the people have good intentions. Maybe I'm naive. but okay.
Thank you, Frank. We do have various data protection acts, and to your point, I do think that a lot of companies are instituting it. And coming back to the point around just upskilling people to understand the risks and taking some precautions with privacy screens, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit of upskilling and just awareness. But thank you very much for your question, for your answer. Just taking a few more questions. We've only got a couple more minutes, so if you have any more questions, please post them. One of the questions coming through from Kim again is, are you seeing a trend towards hiring execs and what is referred to as flash teams, more on a project basis? We're definitely seeing a rise of extended workforces and interim workforces within South Africa. Is this something that you're seeing globally?
I don't know. I don't see this here in Europe a lot. I know, for instance, that the interim sector as a whole is suffering still, that the crisis is not over yet, that post-COVID everybody thinks, okay, the consumer confidence will be rebounding and we will travel again and everything will be back again, but still the companies are struggling and the temporary staff is going down. Flash teams and interim work, I'm not in that sector, so I'm not well placed to evaluate. I don't hear about it a lot here. So most of the time we're confronted with permanent recruitment of permanent executives in certain roles, and sometimes in crisis. And another thing is, let's say, a lot in private equity also. Private equity is on a huge amount of capital to invest. They're really looking now for, let's say, a lot of companies to acquire. And I think there are a lot of opportunities today to acquire companies. And then it has to go fast. And then sometimes you need to install fast a management team. But this will never be a flash team. This will be a permanent team. So I'm not really, I'm not very well placed to answer on this question. Maybe that's the most.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. And a bit more of a personal question, and after that, I think we've only got one more, but an interesting question from Joss, more on the soft skills. We know we've got the future workforce growing up in our homes currently. So the question from him is, as a parent, what are the hard and soft skills we should be encouraging our kids to work on?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Who is the person who asked it? Is the woman or a man?
Joss. It's a man. Joss.
Very good. Very
Joss.
Good. Yeah. You know, with social media and young people sometimes addicted to their computers, to their video games, I think some of the skills are already trained very well. They get along with the digital world very good, and they will be able to focus on the screen a lot. You know, what are the main skills is that they, I think the whole process of education is making, am I still on the screen? Because Jackie, okay, I'm okay. I think the whole, okay, sorry. I thought that everything was frozen. I think the objective of education is making somebody or helping somebody to become an autonomous individual who discovers themselves and who is ready to come into the world. I do not think that it's our mission to prepare somebody for a company. That's something completely different. You have to prepare somebody to discover his talents, his or her talents, and to know what he or she likes or dislikes, and that's hard enough. And then to make sure that they go through the education in a very good way. Don't aim too high, but aim a little bit too high, but not much too high, because the aiming a little bit too high, because the arrow goes down when it goes far away. You have to aim a little bit higher than somebody's talent is. But what are the real hard and soft skills? Our younger people tend to be more autistic than before, because they're more playing games. I do not think so, because in playing games, they sometimes connect with each other also through video games. But it's not the same as, of course, meeting in person. So I think education is not, you cannot use the competence schemes that we apply in companies. You have to be much more flexible, rely much more on your intuition. And well, if you think you do well, just go on. If you have questions, talk about it with somebody. But don't apply the competence schemes, because they're so far away from family life. I think to create a welcoming home for your children and to create a nice environment in which they can develop is hard enough. So don't start with skills. I would say if you give them enough sports, enough intellectual challenges, and with some kids it's easy because they have a talent that is so obvious and they like it so much that they become good at it. But most of the kids, 90%, they don't know what their talent is. They wander around, they can do a little bit this, they can do a little bit that. And you have to discover it. And it's more on, hard working and trying to do something than. So it's a very general answer, and I would like to keep it like that.
No, it's a wonderful answer. So thank you so much. I think sometimes we forget to just focus on the basics and create a warm home and focus on the children at that point. So thank you very much. And thank you for the question, Joss. One last question from Natasha is, obviously we engage quite a lot with entrepreneurs throughout the MEPA region, and many of these entrepreneurial businesses have got a very lean team from a leadership perspective. You've given some great insights around the trends and what needs to happen in organizations. What would be your one point of departure for them in terms of where do they start and what do they implement first?
Where do they start to have a lean team?
From a leadership level, yes. Given the trends that you've given on from a global perspective, it's one of the questions that came through.
So given all these challenges, where do you start?
Yeah.
I think the point to start, if you don't have it yet, is to assess where you are. Where is your company towards the market? Where is your company towards the talent that you have? What is your leadership in your sector? And if you narrow it down to your executive team, to your lean executive team, what are the skills you have there? You have to start from there, and then look to the future, then look to mid-term, and long-term, 3 to 5 years, and define the skill gap.
Fantastic.
Because
Frank,
that's the really focal point. First, analyze where you are and then go further. Never copy, never imitate somebody. Insist on yourself and build from there.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you very much. Frank, thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been incredibly informative. And I do hope everybody has had great insights and taken something away from this. We will share details. Obviously, if anybody has any further questions for Frank, we're happy to share the details and we can get a hold of him. So with that, Frank, thank you again for your time. I know it's only like 7:30 where you are currently, so thank you for getting up super early. And I really hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And thank you so much for joining us on this Talent Hub this morning.
And thanks to each and everybody in this. I feel a very warm and friendly audience, although I don't see you really, or only small. It's a very nice audience. Maybe one day I would like to, I forgot, yesterday I had a meeting with the client and we drank a South African wine, Spioenkop or something. This, I don't know if you know the wine. It was very good wine.
Great wine. It's a great wine. And I'm glad to see you are still drinking it in Europe. So fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you.
Nice day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. We have about a minute before Greg is going to take us on our next journey. I don't know if everybody wants just get up and Greg can get ready. And we're going to hand over through to Trevor just to introduce him. Looking very forward to that.
Okay, thanks. Greg Solomon, welcome and thank you for joining us. Greg started his career as a civil engineer. He joined McDonald's in 1996 as a project manager and has held a variety of roles within the business before becoming CEO of McDonald's South Africa. Greg is an exceptional leader who believes in empowering people and balancing a focused strategy. His leadership has resulted over 10 years of revenue, market share, and profit growth. Greg is married and has 2 adult children. He is passionate about family, wildlife, and health. I've been fortunate over the last couple of years to have worked with and built a great respect for Greg as an individual and as a business leader. Welcome and thank you, Greg, for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor, and hello, everybody. It's crazy that we have to sit and speak to each other like this in these days, but I suppose we're getting used to it. It was an incredible presentation this morning. It adds content. Maybe I'll bring some practical solutions as well. And I think you're going to find that we're going to knit a few similar messages, the practical messages and I guess the more theoretical messages. But if I can share my screen, I'm going to prepare the audience as well. I'm not going to talk for long, but I want to hit nine key points that I pulled out. They're going to be quite fragmented because we are talking a little bit about leadership, I guess. But there will be 9 messages which I'll sort of summarize. And I don't think I'm going to talk for more than about 20 minutes. And then I really want to engage with you. Any questions, go with me. I'll try share my screen if that's possible. And take you through a few thoughts. Let's see if that comes out nicely on your side. Maybe, Jackie, you can give me a view that you got me.
Yes, we've got you. We've got you. Perfect.
So let me first tell you a little bit about McDonald's, because I guess I'm proud to tell you about McDonald's. But the journey looking back in the rearview mirror needs to inform you on where you want to take the business going forward in the next couple of years. So we started in 95 in Blackheath McDonald's on the 11th of November. And we brought drive-through to the country. Many of you listening to me in 1995 probably were Happy Meal eaters. And our business started off very, very strong with Happy Meals, and it started off with drive-through. And hopefully in a humble way, not in an arrogant way. We were the first drive-through, and now drive-through is part of our culture, certainly in our world and certainly in South Africa. And in 2000, we decided, let's introduce breakfast. It's a very, very similar place to where we are with coffee, handheld breakfast. I think if I would have asked all of you on the on the call today, let's launch breakfast in McDonald's, we'll probably come up with 2 fried eggs, some nice low GI toast and a rasher of bacon and some beans with some protein. And that would be breakfast. A little bit difficult to eat beans and toast, I guess, in the car if 70% of our customers come through drive-through. So we came up with this concept called the Egg McMuffin. We have the luxury to steal shamelessly from the rest of the world, and which you can eat it in your car. And it started off at, I remember, 1 or 2% at that point in time. I wasn't in ops yet, and we had many debates of whether we should kill breakfast. It's now 12.5 to 13% of our total business is our breakfast trade. Sometimes you have to, I guess, follow the trends and follow the research. Sometimes you just need to be maverick and be a trend setter. And I think that's pretty important too. In 2005, we said 24/7. And at that point in time, I was really into sort of senior management already, or mid-management. And I remember the 2 franchisees, the late Ishmael Moloko and a good friend of mine now, Peter Moyanga, a franchisee of 15 restaurants now, said, let's go 24/7. And I guess what's that, nearly 20 odd years ago, we thought, I certainly thought at that stage as a much younger guy, I mean, who's around at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night? I mean, I was showing my age already. It was ridiculous. And it's actually not about the 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. It's actually about the shoulder hours. It's that 11 o'clock in the evening, and it's the 5 in the morning as congestion started to pick up 24/7, 6% of our total business. And then we embarked on a massive cultural change and a massive talent acquisition as we started to skill up to 10,000 people. And we won Best Company to Work For 3 years in a row, 2009, 10, and 11. And 2010 already started with our local packaging, a biodegradable type of thinking. And I'm telling you the story because I'm building up to the big question that we all want to know of COVID-19 and where it's going to go. And so we moved into establishing our first Ronald McDonald House of Charities in 2012, which effectively is our little program. You probably all don't know too much about it. It's not because it's designed, we want it that way. It's designed that way. A CSI or a charity that really, really touches our people and motivates our people more than what it motivates our customer. And we serve about 7,000 moms per month now. We've got 2 homes in the Baragwanath, one at Donald Gordon, and we've got an entire, let's call it a small, like Town Lodge hotel on top of the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. We can at least bring moms and dads close to their children when they're facing, huge trauma. And then we went with a very energy conscious movement in 2013 to 2015, make sure that we eradicated a lot of OpEx out of our business. We crossed over 8 million customers every single month around that. And then in 2016, this is already almost 6-7 years ago, we started our transformation around digitalization, and we started our transformation around the 4th industrial revolution, where we added our own delivery. And then we started off really as the pioneers with Uber, and introduced our new app, which is in 2019 was the most downloaded app at that time with 1 million downloads. And finally, in 2019, we were one of 9 countries in the world to launch a hamburger university here in Sandton, which says that university and skills can be taught at school and university, but we know that some skills that our people need in the future haven't even been taught by school yet. So we're going to take a responsibility. Madiba once said that we can change the world with education. We believe that in McDonald's too. And then the latest one is our new delivery platform called Scoot, which is a more progressive platform, and it's slowly taking over as we migrate from Mac Delivery to Scoot, and we hit 16,000 employees in 2021. I guess this is restaurant number 300. We opened this in 2019 in Sammy Mark's downtown Pretoria. I guess many of you may say, well, why choose the location of downtown Pretoria and Sammy Mark's? This design and this building was thought way, way before COVID. Modern and contemporary, a digital playing business. If you look close enough, you'll see the digital screens through the glass walls where people interact digitally and customize their orders. Do you want lettuce? Do you want tomato? Do you want to sit here? And we bring your food to you. And that little yellow spot on the left-hand side of the front door is our McCafe, our coffee brand, which now represents 5% of our total business, 100% Arabica coffee, chai tea lattes, low GI toasted chicken, and a variety of different food experiments, which we believe is the future of cuisine in fast food, soon becoming good food served fast. Now, why I tell you about Sammy Marks is we talk about all these buzzwords, V-curve recoveries, U-curve recoveries, pivots, and all these boring words that we talk about during COVID. But essentially what I'm saying there is I'm saying that if you were already on the path of modernization, of technology, of transformation, of inclusion, if you were already there and thinking, if you had business plans that were thinking out 5 years, 10 years of where you wanted to be, we're probably going to see very similar to what McDonald's is feeling now, is a 12 to 24 month recovery to what we call the normal. Well, normal for us is Q4 2019. That's normal. We are on a strong focus of where we wanted to be, both in customers, in revenue, in EBITDA and profitability. And we determined that as we want to get back to that as quickly as possible. Forgive the helicopters that are flying all around me. I'm sure you're picking it up on my microphone. So we're thinking, not only thinking, we're seeing that 12 to 24 months to get back, hopefully 18 months to get back to that sort of number. We're trading at this point in time at about 90% of normal, 87 to 90% of normal. And you can imagine a restaurant business in April, May, June, and July in 2020, an absolutely catastrophic period of time for restaurants. What saved us, and again, coming back to innovation, which is not necessarily doing something new, it's sometimes doing the same thing differently. Where we see now drive-through now occupying 70% of our business in delivery, up to 15%, 85% of our business is drive-through and delivery versus other restaurants that don't have that luxury. We've positioned ourselves in freestanding real estate properties with drive-throughs. Many other of our competitors haven't. And for those that don't have those two pieces of real estate are still facing significant pain. Now, for those of you that hadn't started your long-term strategies, that hadn't started transforming probably as aggressive before COVID hit us, unfortunately, your recovery may now be longer, maybe 3 years, maybe 4 years. And for some of us in the tourism and maybe closer to the borders and hospitality, maybe even longer. So we're facing a crossroads as leaders, and in any crossroads, we have choices. We are free of our choices, but we are not free of the consequences of our choices. So we as leaders have to choose wisely, very, very wisely, and we have to think carefully. We can't think forever because our choices are today and tomorrow and in the future. But there's certainly some big choices we have to make on how we want to carve our family, our businesses up, how we want to decide on what our futures are, and that goes into our communities, into our families as well. So COVID for me had 3 distinctive phases. We are now moving into the second phase, and the third phase, we had lockdown, and we came together as a country and as a nation fantastically, and we locked down. For many of you, you were still trading. For me, I was offline, and 16,000 people were at home for about 4 to 5 months. And then we started coming out into level 1, into level 2, level 3, level 4, obviously from level 5 on first. And we started going through these phases, up, down, lockdown, hard lockdown. And so we sort of gathered through that, and I guess the vaccines have coming now and it's giving us hope. And now, you know, where to in the future. And effectively for me, all that COVID's done is it said, for those futurists, which I'm not, for those people that were looking at long-term plans, effectively for me, what it said what was going to happen in 2030, in the next decade, through change, through the 4th industrial revolution, through digitalization, through customer preferences, is now pretty much squeezed in, and it's all going to happen by 2022. So we can predict the future. If we were thinking out in 2030, the future is not too daunting. if we weren't thinking out. The future is daunting. But effectively, what COVID's done is it's accelerated change. And we talked about skill sets on the previous presentation. It's how do you deal with the pace of change? How do you deal with upskilling your workforce, your people, your skills, and your technology at a quicker pace? And do we have deep enough pockets through our CapEx to be able to invest in these type of changes that are immense and that are quick? The lady on the right-hand side is a lady by the name of Bridget Degama. She's our Chief People Officer in McDonald's. The gentleman in the middle is Prashant Maharaj. He is the Director of Operations. He's got 100 restaurants under his portfolio. We're 310 restaurants now. He's got about a third of the country. Young man. The moral of the story is not about Prashant and Bridget. The moral of the story is the story about Jim Masina. And Jim was the store manager of Fourways McDonald's at that time. Ran an organization of about 60, 70 people, of humble beginnings. He only had a matric, worked himself through the system as a crew person, and ultimately became a store manager. He's since moved on from Fourways. But we were standing in mid-2019. We were in Chicago at a worldwide awards where Jim had just been knighted with the top 0.5% leaders in store managers around the 35,000 restaurant managers around the world. And the point that I'm trying to make, and the moral of the story, is that South African talent stands shoulder to shoulder with worldwide talent. It's a luxury that I have in McDonald's, where I can compare Jim to 35,000 store managers around the world, to Prashant, to directors around the world, and Bridget, to chief of peoples around the world. And we have some of the best talent in the world. The question is, do we have the confidence? Our greatest leader, Madiba, was for me one of the inspirational leaders of our time, of our decade, and of our world. But I want to talk about this concept called influential leadership. And I want to play a little game with all of you at this present moment. I want you to choose somebody in your mind, anyone, family member, business colleague, employee, and I want you to rate that person for me out of 10, where 10 is outstanding and 1 is terrible. I want you to rate that person for me on how much you trust that person. And then I want you to rate that person for me on how much you respect that person. Trust and respect. 10 is brilliant, 1 is terrible. I hope you've got your score. You don't have to tell anyone. In this particular case, you're all at the home or office, so you don't have to see anyone either. Now, I want you to multiply those two numbers together. So my numbers is 8 and 8. So I'm going to multiply them together. So I've got 64. You got your number? Good. Well, if that person didn't score more than 75% or 75, then that person's not influential in your life. Now, the question is, it's not about what you rated that person. The question is, it's what people would rate you as a leader. And we look to deliver on our promise, and that builds trust. And we look to teach somebody something new every single day, and that builds respect. So I believe we don't have a leader problem in this country, and nor do we have a leader problem in the world. We truly have a leadership problem in this country and in this world. And us as leaders that are sitting on these conference calls today, can you imagine if we could all put our hands up and say, pick me, I'll deliver on my promise, and I'll teach somebody something new today. And if we had more influential leadership in our world, it would be a better place. I've taken out some numbers. This is the strategic plan for McDonald's, not a 1,000 deck that I'm presenting to you today. One page is our strategic plan. Maximize marketing. We committed to our core, and we doubled downing on the D's. Our foundation is talent and running great restaurants. We've got some customer outcomes, some business outcomes, but the simplicity of your business plan is absolutely crucial to an organization versus long-winded 4, 5, 6-page documents, which you can't align necessarily 16,000 people around it. So I guess during COVID, the time is for us to focus. It is time for us to innovate too, but it's time to focus. In McDonald's, one of our core values is Q, S, C, and V: quality, service, cleanliness, and value. And I'm sure that many, I'm very comfortable that if you had to go into a McDonald's restaurant and call for the restaurant manager and say, I just heard Greg speak, can you explain to me what Q, S, C, and V is? I'm very confident that all 16,000 people will be able to tell you that it's quality, service, cleanliness, and value. And during trying times like it is today, what we need a rally cry. We need a focus. So I guess my question to you today or this morning is what is your single one thing that all of your people in your organization will be able to not only state, but explain, to present to an audience like this? Focus is important. Like a chess master in any mastermind game, it's not so much about the move that you're going to make. It's more around the 3 or 4 moves that you've got in mind as a contingency plan, all right? Because you've got a certain time to be able to play the game. So it's all around contingencies right now and crisis management. So we've got a robust crisis management team. So I'm thinking what happens when the rand dollar goes to 20? I'm thinking what happens when the rand dollar goes down to 10? Well, it'll never get to 10, so we know that. Maybe 13.5, or maybe bottoms out at 14. So we've got to have those two. What are those 2 implications on the business? Am I going to wait for that to happen, or are we going to wait for that to happen? Or do we already have a plan in our hedging policies, in our localizations policies if rand dollar goes to 20? And so that's what I mean around making yourself more nimble as a leader in the organization. Are we spending time putting out fires? Are we spending time like the chess master trying to plan what the opponent's going to plan, what the opponent's going to play, so we can create nimbleness, we can create a pace and speed in our decision-making for us, because we've already quasi-thought. You're never going to be able to make that decision until the time comes, but you've got to be able to plan for it accordingly. So this is Sandton, in the heart of Sandton, the richest mile, as they say in Africa. And this is Alexander Township, almost 2.4 kilometers away. We have 3 restaurants in Alexander Township, and we have 2 restaurants in Sandton. We live in Africa, and whilst it's a crying shame why we have 2 areas that are so diversely different in their way and in their thinking, we need to understand that a customer that lives in Sandton has an expectation of your brand. Yet a customer that lives in Alexander has an expectation or an aspiration of your brand. One is an aspiration, one is an expectation. The person that lives in Alex is a person that works in Sandton. So that's why you'll find the Sammy Marks restaurant, our top brand restaurant in Sammy Marks, because we don't discriminate between what a McDonald's restaurant in Sandton looks like versus a McDonald's restaurant looks like in Soweto or in Alexander or Puta de Chada or Musina or Toandu. These restaurants look the same. Our brand needs to be the same. It needs to be consistent, and it needs to be authentic. And interestingly enough, we have 3 in Alex and 2 in Soweto, which we can pick up if you want to in the Q&A. So there's no time like now for brave leadership. Unfortunately, leadership that I guess is sitting in their ivory tower, commanding the troops to be in the field is quite a hectic time. And so I spend a lot of time in the restaurants. There was a question on how do we get out from behind the screens. Well, we're lucky enough to have 300 restaurants out there, and certainly we don't want heaps and heaps of people meeting, but I spend a lot of my time in the field, trying my best not to spread the virus all over the place, but in the field and doing a lot of discussions from the restaurants. But we're going to have to take brave decisions. We're going to have to lead by example. We're going to have to be visible as leaders. We're going to have to be talking to our people all the time as leaders, even if it's through selfie videos, we talk to our people. But the leader that's behind the scenes, the leader that's not visible, unfortunately, is the leader that's going to struggle with their business recovery. In McDonald's, we have a concept called the 3-legged stool. It's not about making everybody happy. It's about making everybody equally happy. See, this is about relationships. our franchisees, our suppliers, and us as employees of the corporation have to be equally happy. It's about harmony. So communication will determine our destiny. You cannot not communicate because everything sends a message. And one of the biggest skills right now as leaders is listening. We've got 2 ears, I guess, and 1 mouth. The listening, the ability to listen and understand what our people are saying is absolutely paramount right now. There's a concept called the power of 10. Every time your business changes by 10x, you need to fundamentally change the way you think, fundamentally change your strategy, and certainly fundamentally change your leadership. If you're in an organization that's gone from 10 employees to 100 employees, from 1 million EBITDA to 10 million EBITDA, from 1,000 customers to 10,000 customers, you cannot run your business the same way, with the same process and same leadership. And even us as leaders need to reflect, are we obsolete? I was having a conversation with a founder of a business, which we now do business with, and we used to talk a lot 10 years ago. And I remember that discussion where he said to me, many of you will know him. And I remember as a founder of the organization, he said, Greg, I just can't take my business to the next level. Anyway, it resulted in a lot of different changes in his organization. He became the chief creative officer. He employed a board and a new CEO, which took his business to the next level, because he knew as a founder of his organization, if he wanted to grow this business 10x, he needed fundamental changes in culture, in leadership, and in organization alignment. And he was one of the problems too. Likewise, if COVID's changed your business to 10x minus, if you had to put it that way, you need to fundamentally change the way you think as well. So innovation is an oxymoron, if you want to put it that way, I'm saying to you, focus. But really what I'm saying to you here is, where is the inspiration of your innovation? You see, if the CEO is the only person that's innovating, you're going to get one great idea every quarter. But if you have an innovative culture in your organization where the people are innovating, and I've got 16,000 great ideas, all I have to do is choose the best one. So you've got to create an innovative culture. Now, an innovative culture means, so we have an email address called innovation.co@mcdonalds.co.za, and that email address comes directly to me. So once a month, I'm able to have a look at the greatest ideas, but you've got to then announce them and you've got to execute them. Even if they fail, it's okay. You've got to show the people that as long as you give me messages and as long as you give me ideas, we will execute the best ones. Whether they pass or whether they fail, that's a separate issue. Leadership is about balance, the balance of your persistence versus your patience, the balance between your top line and your bottom line, the balance between your loyalty and, I guess, your customers. It's a constant balancing game. It's like juggling 10 balls in the air, and that 11th one comes on, you have to sacrifice at some point in time. But it's the art of balancing. Not balancing to the fact that you become totally sort of average on 10 things versus a winner on 5, but you're constantly balancing, and that skill of ambiguity and balance is important. I'll leave the pyramids and the base to a different time. So I close off with my final thoughts, and my final thought was about 10 years ago. So I've been sort of leading this business for about that time. It was about 8 years ago. 8 years ago, we decided to say to our restaurant managers, instead of a bonus, I guess, which we did ultimately pay at the end of the day, the top people that hit these 2 KPIs or these 3 KPIs, a revenue KPI, a profit KPI, and a people KPI, if you hit that KPI, you book yourself on this boat to Mauritius and back with myself and the Exco team. And 72% of all restaurant managers hit those KPIs. And I guess we were on that boat for 7 days with no cell phone signal with a whole bunch of young restaurant managers. It was a crazy time. But I was standing at the back of the boat. I'm sure many of you can see me right at the back there. I'm standing, no, I'm joking. It wasn't me. I was standing at the back of the boat trying to understand, how does this massive ship turn? How does the driver of the ship turn the ship? And I guess I couldn't get, as soon as I got home, I Googled, how does a ship turn? And in the old days, well, in the new days, these big ships turn with jet engines. You've got these jet engines that propel the ship back and forward. But in the old days, a ship has to turn with a rudder. And because they were so big, it was impossible for somebody to turn a rudder with the forces. So you had a small rudder that was embedded in the big rudder, and it's called the trim tab, TRIMTAB, the trim tab. Now, when you turn the trim tab left, the rudder turns right. And when the rudder turns right, the ship turns left. I guess it was the first power steering of a ship at that point in time. But the leadership message for me, we can talk about strategy, we can talk about culture, we can talk about contingency plans, we can talk about innovation and focus. The leadership thing for me is that the small things in life, no matter before or after COVID, are the most important things that we can do. The thank you, the hello, the phone call. I haven't heard from you for a while. The smile, your face. Those are the small things in life that can do, and we should spend a substantial part of our time making sure that we focus on the small things with our people. So today I spoke about choices, about the change and the pace of modernization, about influential and brave leadership, about having a long-term plan, but making sure that you focus big dreams, small steps, and having contingency plans. The terrible Gini coefficient on what it does to this country and how we should think as business leaders, the relationships and the small things, on how important that is, the power of 10 and why you have to innovate both back and forth, the 10x factor, the balance that you have to make as a leader in our organizations. So I thought I would just give you a bit of that and leave it with that, close my presentation and look forward to take a few questions.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you so much. Such useful insights. And the one thing that really resonates in terms of what you're saying reminds me of Occam's razor around simplification. And it really is a focus that is coming through and doing the simple things continuously well. So thank you very much for that. Hugely insightful. We've got a couple of questions that have come through from Joss. A question to you, Greg. What is the biggest challenge you face leading a team across so many regions and being so distributed? And how do you structure your leadership team to get to them?
So we clearly know that Greg can't run this business. So a success factor for me is that if I'm not here, can this business run without me? And yes, it can. So it's a flat structure. It's a lean structure. I have 5 executives that report into me: chief of marketing, he's got chief of supply chain, chief of development that's building the restaurants, chief of people, chief of franchising, and chief of finance. The operation guy, Mlu, has got 3 directors of operations underneath him. Each one controls 100 restaurants. In that operating base, they have operations managers. Each of them control 25 restaurants. And then we have area managers that each control 6. And then we have obviously restaurant managers. So it's a structure. They all control their own budgets. They're all owners, if you want to put it in their own right. We do have 40% of our restaurants franchised, 60% company run. So the franchisees help us. So yeah, look, there's not one CEO in this business. Indirectly, there's probably 30, 40 CEOs in this business, which makes our life quite easy. So it's formally structured, but I want to keep it entrepreneurial as well, which means that Colin Messina, an operations manager who's got 20 restaurants in the west part of Gauteng, is pretty much running his own marketing budget. He's doing his own thing. I call it freedom within a framework. High levels of accountability, very, very strong people skills, marketing skills, operational skills. You have to fragment it that way.
Fantastic. And I think that really speaks to one of the areas that came out around leadership and understanding that, with a level of authenticity and humility, you can't be everywhere all the time. So being able to cascade that ownership down and having the courage to do that and trust your people, I think is critical. So thank you very much for that answer. A second question that's come through, Greg, is in becoming future fit and building a talent framework that best positions McDonald's for the next 5 to 10 years. What do you think are the biggest challenges in heading into a world leading multinationals and South African operations and balancing the two in terms of a disparate workforce? Trevor, that's a very long question. As far as unemployment rates are going.
He always has to ask me the trick question, Trevor, you know, when he's asking that. Yeah, look.
That's a long question. So
look,
yes.
Yeah, future fit. I mean, let's talk about it from a human capital perspective, and let's talk about it from a brand perspective. You plant mealie seeds now because you're going to harvest them in 5 years' time. You can research the hell out of things and find out what's the next thing in the world, or you can just go ahead and try stuff. You know, I really pull my hair out with my business and consumer insights guys sometimes, because they want to prove to me on spreadsheets on what the future looks like. And I'm saying, guys, just try the thing, for goodness sake. What's the worst that can happen? You know, try it in Eastern Cape. We've got 15 restaurants there, and if it fails, it fails. So we do a lot of experimenting stuff. That's quite important. And that innovation piece that I mentioned before, I mean, there we empower small teams to be able to do stuff, and we give them 10 restaurants to try it in. And I would probably say that for every one success we have 9 failures. So to become future fit, try stuff out there, and you're gonna find things there. From a future perspective, there's something interesting, very interesting. And Trevor, you and I have debated this before. I mean, you can have a person that earns 1.5 million rand a year, who's now 50, 60 years old, and you can almost recruit 5 people at 300,000 rand a year that have just come out of university for the same price. And now this is becoming very, very interesting now on how your older generation, sort of now I'm saying between 40 and 60, if the world around you is changing faster than the internal world, you're going to become irrelevant. And so education is actually not about school and university anymore. Education is now about the university of life. Otherwise, you become obsolete very, very quickly. So the future fit corporate employees ever training. One of your KPIs, and I don't like to have more than 5 KPIs on a person's performance evaluation, but one of your KPIs is what are you training on? And so we give a lot of bursaries. Hamburger University now is training 2,500, mainly at the junior levels, people, our own staff, every single year. If you're not, the digitalization is allowing us to do a lot of training online. We've got a few guys doing MBAs every year, few guys doing financials, few guys doing coding every single year. Spreadsheets are becoming so much more important in everyday life. If you are not training, you will fail your performance review. We have a concept called if you're green, you're growing. So I hope I answered a little bit. So I'll leave you with these 2 things: constant training. University is the start, not the end. And the second one is try stuff. Because for every 9 things you try, you know, you'll get one golden nugget, with no pun intended.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you very much for the question, Trevor. I hope that answered, and I think it's critical to be able to take the ongoing learning and the university of life forward. And I think it also talks to what you mentioned around leadership and continuously teaching something new every day to earn their respect and obviously lead with courage. One of the questions that I've actually got for you from my side, Greg, is we've spoken about failure and implementing innovation, etc. And I think one of the biggest challenges I know that we as a business are facing as well is we're not exactly structured to always deal with the failures from a financial point of view or an impact point of view. And typically organizations will focus on, achievement and success. How do you manage that risk within McDonald's? And I think it's fantastic that you're implementing all this innovation, but how do you manage that risk, allowing for the failure, the 9 failures for 1 success, to be able to learn from without damaging your business?
Well, without sort of trying to give another example of something similar, I mean, you're not trying small things, you're not trying big things, you're trying small things. So one of the ways that you've got to do that is you try it in small pockets, and you try it aggressively. So don't try big things on a national level. So that would be the one thing. And then you need to try and understand that this country is a big country. I mean, there's many other countries around Africa, certainly in the States. You can't, I mean, our whole country can fit into Texas, but in the number of McDonald's restaurants. But I mean, we see Cape Town differently the way we see Johannesburg. We see Free State the way we see it differently. So it's not a one fit for all sides, but you minimize your risk by starting off small. Essentially, that's the way I'm sort of going to answer your question there. But yet again, if you relate it to an ROI, you may need to spend R1 million to make 10 million. You can't cut yourself rich.
Exactly. So can't save ourselves into profit. Thank you very much. That does answer my question. Greg, we've got another question that's come through from Joss. Outside of the annual cruise, which looked like you had a lot of fun and fantastic, definitely learned something about the trim tab. But outside of the annual cruise, how else do you incentivize your staff right through from junior through to senior? I mean, you do a lot of stuff for your people, development, etc. But how else do you incentivize them?
Yeah, look, I mean, we can very quickly get into a REM conversation, and REM's typically your basic pay, your increases, your bonuses, and then your long-term incentives. So I'll leave it at that we have those things in place. I think those are important, and I don't think, I was just looking at our opinion surveys yesterday, and constantly I look at REM, and I'm constantly never getting to the desired outcome that I want to get in. So I just think it's a natural thing that people will always want remuneration and money. So I think this question needs to go much deeper into other areas, and what really motivates people is the ability for them to contribute, the ability for them to be able to say, the next toasted chicken mayonnaise sandwich was actually designed by Miranda Naidu, and it's hers. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And we put it into the organization. The fact that I could do an MBA, the fact that I could start as a cleaner in McDonald's and now become an award-winning restaurant manager that goes to Chicago. The fact that, that I can be given coaches that can coach me and grow into the organization. So a massive part of our campaign, or what we call our EVP, which is the complete package of an employee value proposition, is around training, advancement. The average age of a McDonald's person is only 27 years old. So you only need a matric to come work for McDonald's. So Jim, that restaurant manager, only had a matric. Colin Messina only had a matric. Joanne DeVette, the chief operating officer of McDonald's, had a tertiary education, worked her way up, but she's sort of in the top structure of McDonald's South Africa. It's the University of Life. And the other thing as well is we're not too afraid to have churn in our business. We have about 20% churn in our organization per annum, about 18% churn. And that's a good thing for us. We're ready for that. We can get somebody up and well-skilled within about 3-4 months. They are at a level of productivity, especially at that restaurant level. And churn is good, because if you've had a great experience with McDonald's as an employee, you will become a mom and a dad and a customer of McDonald's, and you will forever continue. That annuity income for us is a great employment experience. Josh, I've avoided your question a little bit, but I hope you realize it's not just about REM.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that we've discussed numerous times as well. And we're also seeing, to your point, the whole focus around social organizations and purpose-based organizations, and it's come through in your discussion as well. And in terms of the experience, can't agree more. And that also drives innovation. Your churn drives innovation internally, and the experience of the ex-staff member, they're the biggest consumer of your brand. So absolutely useful. Just there's another question a little bit more on the fun side for you, Greg, especially talking about this ongoing learning. And if you're green, you're growing. Not saying that you're green, but definitely still growing. Question from Trevor is, what is your greatest source of learning, and what do you like reading?
Yeah, so I'm not a big story reader, and we read so much, and I'm not a big book reader. Recently read Richard Sutton's Stress Code, because we're dealing with such a huge amount of stress. And then I've dusted off an old book that I'm reading by President Mbeki, where he talks about the future of the ANC, because it's so important for us to understand the culture. So I think I'm boring there, Trevor, by reading these type of books. But a story about Greg and his apple going to the beach is probably not where I am. I'm a big consumer of YouTube. I'm a big consumer of YouTube. I find that quite inspirational, and a big consumer of TED. I think it's just easy for me. I don't watch a lot of TV at all, except for sport. But those are my two inspirations: reading sort of history, reading sort of futurists, and watching a lot of YouTube and TED stuff is where I get a lot of my inspiration.
Fantastic. And I mean, to your point, that's how you keep abreast. So any other questions? I'm just conscious of time as well. I don't see any other questions coming through. We've probably got some time for one or two more. So unless Greg, unless you want to close out, I'll just give the group one or two questions more if you have some time.
Look, we've spoken a lot about leadership, and the questions again don't need to come through only on leadership. We always get any questions. Health and obesity is going to be the big one I always get, and fast food and all of those type of things. But look, at the end of the day, no matter what it is about people, and it is about the inspiration of aligning 16,000 people around one focus. It's about modernizing your business. It's about thinking long term. And COVID's come and it's given us a blip, and it's set us back 1-2 years, if we're lucky, 3-4 years. But don't lose sight of the future and where you want to be as an organization, as a business. And just remember that the outside environment is changing quicker than the inside environment. You're going to become irrelevant. And just remember, if you're sitting on your hands and you're sitting on the sidelines and gossiping as the world is changing, and complaining as the vaccine rollout is not going to your likings, and we haven't really stepped in as leaders and contributed, helped, and given valued opinion, then we need to ask our question: what role are we playing in society?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I've certainly taken from chatting is around the focus, the simplification of the business plan and the actual implementation, and leadership having to adapt. I mean, the Chief Creative Officer, I think, is a fantastic takeaway as well. We do have one last question that's come through from Kolya, in terms of the interviewing process that you go through, particularly in terms of your leadership. So what interview process do you go through for leaders, and what key things do you look for?
So I'm quite a big culture guy. I like to, now culture's not about employing a whole bunch of like-minded white male engineers all running in the same direction. Actually, on the contrary, culture is about diversity. It's about inclusion. It's about having different conversations, about creating a little bit of positive discomfort in your team. Because if we've got a leadership team that's a whole bunch of Gregs, we're actually going to become stale very, very quickly. So one of my toughest meetings is my leadership team, because they're so different. What needs to knit us together is the silver lining of values, silver lining of beliefs. And I think that's what I'm looking for when I go through an interview process. So at that top 10, I'm certainly interviewing that top 10 structure, which is the ExCo, the executives, the 5 executives, and the sort of 10 directors in the organization. That top 15, I will interview. And obviously my HC team will do the psychometrics and a whole bunch of the pre-screening with the recruitment agency. But once it's sort of getting to me, your first meeting with me will be in a McDonald's restaurant. We'll sit down in a McDonald's, we'll share the service together. We'll eat a Big Mac and French fries or a cheeseburger, and we'll drink. And there's an element there in the interview. I want to see how that person engages within a restaurant environment. The second interview would probably be in the boardroom with me, and we'll go through that. And if you are a top 2, you might find putting on a pair of sneakers and going for a 5-kilometer walk with me, like I like to do on a Sunday, and have that type of interview. So you can see it's very different on the way I would structure it, but I choose that top 10 very, very carefully. And I'm looking for just some very, very fine lines around sort of health and well-being. I'm looking for your understanding of what it would be. It's a completely different take. And I want to see that individual. And in a typical interview, one of the hardest things that I do with some of the leadership is when you arrive at it, so saying, right now, you need to interview me, and I'm not going to interview you. Because if you haven't done research on me, or if you haven't done research on McDonald's and what you want and how you're going to contribute towards this business, then I don't want you in the team.
That's fantastic insights, and really, you know, I think it also challenges the paradigms around what an interview is and isn't, and throwing it a little bit on its head and having different types of experiences through that, I think is a fantastic takeaway. So thank you so much for that, Greg. Right, Greg, we're basically wrapping up. Just again, want to say thank you very much for your time. Some huge takeaways. I'm certainly going to go away as an individual and think about that one thing that my people can explain, because I haven't got the answer yet. So thank you very much for that. Some real nuggets there. So thank you so much, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day, and God bless. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much, Greg.
Okay, guys, we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. It means we can take a little bit of a leg stretch. If I can ask that we're maybe take 10 minutes. We've had 2 heavy and very interesting sessions. I'm sure you want to take a leg stretch. Let's go and take 10 minutes if we can be back at just before past, and then we'll go into the breakaway rooms for a couple of minutes and the plenary. Thank you so much for your attendance. So thank you very much for coming back on time. I know everybody's time is precious. I think we've got about a minute left. We'll just give a couple of the guys just to have time to be back, unless everyone's back. Laura, can you see if everyone's back?
Sorry, I think they are. There have been a few people that have left the call though.
Okay, can I just ask you to please share the screen, or I must share my screen if we're just going to do the breakouts for the question.
Jackie, will you share the screen?
Yeah, sure. Okay, guys, we've had some fantastic insights today, both from a global and in boardroom perspective, and I definitely took away a hell of a lot of pulls. The most evident one for me specifically was around the simplification and really keeping things simple and making sure leadership is present. A lot of discussion around culture, a lot of discussion around authenticity, and just doing the simple things consistently and well, not necessarily turning our businesses on its head to try and adjust to all this volatility. So I do hope that you found it interesting. We're going to go into our breakaway sessions as we usually do. We've allowed for about 10 minutes on this one, so that we've got a little bit more time, so I think we could possibly make it about 15 minutes. If everybody is okay, we're still finishing at 10 o'clock, then we can do 15 minutes in the smaller breakaway rooms, and Lara will split us up again. We're going to have one of the EO panel members in each of the sessions so that it's not disruptive. But there's only one question today that needs to be answered by yourselves, and that is, what would be your top takeaway from today's session that you can actually implement in your business that was like sort of that aha moment? And then we'll come back after 15 minutes and into the plenary just to give the feedback and the close. Any questions?
That's not a McDonald's takeaway here, Jackie.
No. Well, I'm not going to judge on anybody's eating behaviors, but no, not a McDonald's. Or it might be a McDonald's takeaway. So Lara, any questions from the members before we break out, just with regards to the next part of the process, or unless, Lara, you can just split us out now?
So Jackie, maybe.
For those of you, do you want to join your room? Sorry.
How's it?
Have you guys? Have you got the meeting? Okay.
Lara to please post the survey onto the group if she hasn't done already. She's always one step ahead of me, and she has already.
There it
Thank you,
goes.
Lara. Guys, please give us your feedback. It's been very useful to get your comments on the sessions, and we kind of try things and amend as we go along, just as Greg was telling us. So we need your feedback. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for that, Joss, and thanks for reminding. That is something I did forget, so thank you very much for picking that up. And to Joss's point, it is super, super useful to get your feedback, because we do adjust, as you would have seen, taking your feedback into consideration to ensure we meet expectations. So everybody should be back now. We've got quite there's only a few of us left out of the breakouts, which is a pity. But maybe if we just ask the groups to maybe start with group one, in terms of the question being the takeout from today, and what you can implement back in your workplaces and what the learning has been. So maybe let's just go through the individuals in the group.
Right, so from our side, a few key takeaways were having a resilience built into your teams, resilient people, particularly in these times. The need for regular meeting rhythms, communication across your teams, particularly when some people are working from home, and just ensuring that you're always engaged. Making sure that you've got culture and values alive across the organization, looking past where you are now and where you are going. Keeping it simple and authentic, and at the same time having a realistic view of where you are and what you need to do to get to where you're going. And the realization that leading a company is really about working for your people and ensuring that they're all aligned and heading in the same direction. And then a key phrase that came out was, leaders are free of choice, but not free of consequences. It's quite interesting statement.
Thank you very much, Ben. And remember, we're going to, as Mindcorp, come and do an audit afterwards, because we're going to see that you've implemented all of this, right? So just kidding. Actually, maybe not. But yeah, so the biggest thing is it's fantastic to have these sessions and chat about it. But I mean, the reality is where the rubber hits the road. So even if you just pick one of those, some fantastic takeaways, Ben, thank you so much. But pick one of those and implement it, and let's see how it goes. If you fail, you try the next one, to Greg's point. Thank you very much, Ben. Who is going to speak for group two?
I think we were group two, were we?
Yes.
Good, Joss, thank you. So just reporting back or summarizing what we discussed, a number of the things that came up, one of which was the 10xing your business in a positive or negative way, and the fundamental changes that are required around that. There was also the one thing. What is the one thing that your business and your people need to be able to talk to be able to stay on top of that? So just echoing what Jackie had said. One of the guys mentioned that communicating his brand and values to his team has become more and more prevalent, and he's made a real point of getting that done. Also, the innovations email address and giving the credit to the person whose idea was actually implemented. One of the other guys mentioned that he spends a lot of time on the small things, on trying to improve tweaks and changes, and he sometimes leaves his team behind, and that it doesn't get filtered down to the team. It sort of stops at the boardroom. It was a reminder to the simplicity of what this could be, and how basic this could be, and then also just recognizing that sometimes being really good at the basics is what is really necessary. I can relate to this in my space, in my sort of industry. And then lastly, just freedom within a framework. And so the greater organization into smaller territories and the rules that are well defined to allow people the room and space to be able to grow and improve and implement.
Fantastic. There's some wonderful, wonderful takeaways there. And I mean, the innovation address, absolutely. And I think one of the things is actually taking the ideas and implementing and giving that feedback. So some really nice action items there, Grant. Thank you so much from you and your group. Group 3.
Graham, Grant, Farine, Sean and Stuart.
How's it? So I've just been appointed privately to do this. Okay, so the few things that I remember is the recognition and growth. How do we connect between productivity and which obviously now that we kind of digital, it's a lot easier to, or people are finding it more easier to be more productive. But how do we then still create being with our people and creating a balance between that and how important that is? And then also about top management change and putting the right people in the right position. And that's what I remember.
Sean, thank you very much. And I mean, that is some fantastic takeaways. I think the top management change is specifically something that we can all take away. And as leaders, being courageous enough to accept we've taken a business as far as we can go, and we might become the chief creative officers, and maybe there's somebody better positioned to take us to the next level. Definitely a takeaway for me as well. So some lovely action points there. And then of course, balance, which we're all striving towards. Outside of the Dalai Lama, I don't know who else has got balance, but yeah, balance is a continuous learning journey. So thank you very much for that insight to you and your team, and adapting and being agile. Sean, picking it up at the last minute. With that, I think we're on group 4, if my counting is accurate. Lara, who was group 4?
It's Kolya, Safa, Trevor, Marwan.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was 5, so that's why the silence.
It was 5, but
it was okay. There you go. Thank you.
Never renamed.
Again, I think it's leading in from last session as well, but like, you know, every single employee knowing the McDonald's values was vastly, you know, inspirational to like try and get that culture going, that your people know the values and what they actually mean. So not just rattle them off because they got told them. Just try things out. You know, I think that was a takeaway. Keep things simple with that one-page kind of vision PSP, or, you know, the strategic plan. So like have a massive document that you can't get through. And again, being people-centric, hands-on management structure, engage with your stakeholders, that three-legged stool, you know, to make everyone equally happy, meaning internally, suppliers and customers. And again, that values and beliefs, you know, again, came through. And yeah, visible leadership, you know, if you grow, you need change. And I really like the 5K walk. So
it was fantastic. Kolya, thank you so much for that input. And to your last point, yes, the 5K walk, I think that's how they overcome the obesity issues in terms of McDonald's. So keep people fit as they're going along. But yeah, it's wonderful to understand that you can actually shake things up. You can go for your 5K walks or have an interview in a McDonald's restaurant and so forth. So really looking at that innovation. So thank you very much for that. Again, the simplification coming through, I think that was a key message. And I do hope that through the sessions, you've seen that outside of what we say, or, you know, as human capital practitioners or talent practitioners, the businesses out there, the real people in the businesses, be it Robbie, be it Greg, whomever, are saying people are front and center, values are front and center, culture defines and predicts competitive advantage. And those are definitely things that are coming through for me, especially. I obviously cannot speak for you, but there's definitely a golden thread which is coming through. So thank you very much for the feedback, Collier, to you and your team, which is now group 4. Lara has a wonderful way of spicing things up at the last minute with group numbers. So thank you. Lara, there aren't any further groups? I think we've completed with all the groups.
That's it.
Fantastic. I think I'm just going to hand over also to Joss to maybe close, but before closing, we're smack on time, which is fantastic. But just before we close, remember, we've got our last session happening in about 2 weeks. Super exciting session around incentivization, remuneration, really looking at retention. We've got 2 global experts coming in to speak to us around this and how to retain staff and what are some of the new trends coming out around REM, incentivization, share allocation, etc., etc. So that would be closing off the 4 learning hubs for us. So hope to see you all there as well. And with that, I'd just like to hand over to Joss to close off for us. Thank you very much for your engagement, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Jackie, thank you so much once again for facilitating today's session. To the Mindcore team, Natasha and Trevor, thank you very much. To all the people from around the MEPA region, great to have you join us. It's our last one on the 3rd of March. Please diarize it. Look out for the details on the Thirst for Learning group, and hope you have an amazing day and rest of the week. Thank you, everyone.